The glass of orange juice trembled in my hand as I stood by the kitchen counter, forcing a smile. The family breakfast had always been tense, but today it was worse. My father sat at the head of the table, tapping his ring against the table's edge like a ticking clock. My mother sat beside him, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, and lips curled in that usual judgmental frown. "You think helping some charity and selling those tiny art prints makes you worthy of a share?" My father said, not even looking up from his phone. "Let's stop pretending, Lena. You're not like the rest of us. You're just a disappointment." The room was silent. Even the sound of the ceiling fan seemed to fade. I cleared my throat. "Dad, I never asked for the money. I just thought." "We took your name off the family trust," he interrupted coldly. "Last night. It's done." I froze. "What?" "Consider this tough love," my mother added with a shrug. "You'll thank us when the real world slaps you." "Wait, you what?" My voice cracked. "You actually removed me? Without even telling me first." "Why would we?" she asked, sipping her tea. "You were never part of the legacy. Look at you, still working part-time, painting like it's a purpose. Grow up, Lena. You'll be nothing without us." It felt like someone had kicked the air out of my chest. They didn't say it out of frustration, they meant it. Deep down, they'd been waiting to cut me off. But what they didn't know was that I wasn't empty-handed. I set my juice down carefully and stood taller, despite the lump in my throat. "Well," I said, voice low but steady. "Thank you for making things clear." I turned and walked out of that house without looking back. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Because I wouldn't. I wouldn't cry this time. That night, as the rain tapped gently on my apartment window, I sat curled up on my old couch, a canvas half finished beside me, and my cat purring near my feet. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering. A deep voice came through.
Calm.
Controlled. "Miss Lena Moore?" "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Carter Wells. I represent a client who's interested in your story. He would like to meet." "My story?" I asked slowly.
Yes.
"The one you shared at the community fundraiser last weekend, about growing up in silence. Your art, the Shelter Support Initiative." He found it moving. I blinked. That fundraiser was barely attended. "He asked me to reach out," Carter continued, "to let you know he believes in you. And he'd like to help you turn your work into something real. Something bigger. Would you be open to meeting tomorrow?" I sat frozen. The last few hours had been a blur of pain and betrayal. And now this? "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, I would." But while I was still wrapping my head around the call, my parents were sitting in their lavish living room, sipping wine and congratulating themselves. Until there was a knock at the door. My father grunted, annoyed. "Who knocks this late?" He opened the door, and standing there in a sharp suit was Carter Wells himself. "Can we help you?" my father asked, still smug. Carter reached into his coat pocket, pulled out an envelope, and held it forward. "My client has just signed over full sponsorship rights to Miss Lena Moore's foundation," Carter said calmly. "She's now the sole director of a multi-million-dollar initiative set to launch next quarter. He asked me to inform you personally because she chose not to." My father's hands shook as he took the envelope. Carter paused, then added one final sentence. "Turns out she never needed your trust fund, because someone else trusted her more." My father collapsed onto the nearest chair, pale and speechless. The next morning, I stood outside a tall glass building in Midtown, the sun catching on its mirrored surface. I stared up at it, heart racing. Just 24 hours ago, I was being kicked out of my own family's trust like some unwanted outsider. Now, I was about to walk into a skyscraper owned by someone who saw value in me, someone who didn't just throw around promises but followed through. I took a deep breath and walked in. The lobby was silent and spacious. Minimalist. Elegant. A receptionist looked up with a warm smile. "Miss Lena Moore?" I nodded. "Mr. Hayes is expecting you." She pressed a button, and moments later, an elevator opened. Inside, I stared at the numbers as they climbed. My palms were sweaty, but I refused to second-guess myself. I had always believed my art, My advocacy, my ideas had value. But until now, nobody had ever looked me in the eye and said, "I believe in you." The doors opened to a penthouse-level office, where Carter stood waiting. "Right on time," he said, motioning for me to follow. I stepped into the boardroom, and there he was. Julian Hayes. The Julian Hayes. Venture philanthropist.
Investor.
Billionaire with a reputation for uplifting underdog stories and staying out of the spotlight. He stood up from the table and extended his hand.
Lena.
"I've been waiting to meet you." His grip was firm. His eyes kind. I don't even know what to say." I stammered. "You don't need to say anything," he replied. "I've already seen your work. You speak through it." We sat. Carter handed me a simple leather folder. Inside, an offer. Funding. A space. A team. Everything I needed to scale my community project into something permanent. Art therapy programs, shelters turned creative hubs, youth outreach funded through gallery sales. Why me? I finally asked. Why now? Julian leaned forward. "Because you remind me of someone I lost. She was dismissed by the people who should have loved her most. Just like you. But she didn't become bitter.
She built something.
She made a life out of what they threw away." He smiled. "And you are doing the same." That afternoon, I returned to my tiny apartment, but my mind wasn't in that room anymore. I called the local shelter director. We talked about programs. I drafted emails to community centers, galleries, even therapists I'd met over the years. I barely noticed the time passing, until my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. "Lena?" My brother's voice came through, cautious. I froze. "Ethan?"
Hey.
"So listen, Mom and Dad are kind of freaking out. Some guy in a suit showed up last night. Said something about a foundation and a partnership, and they're convinced you're hiding something." I sighed. "I'm not hiding anything." "Well, whatever you're doing, Dad looks like he's aged 10 years overnight. He barely touched his steak. That's saying something." I didn't respond. "Look," Ethan said, voice lowering. "I know they weren't fair to you. I didn't have the guts to speak up back then. I should have." That hit harder than I expected. "It's okay," I said after a pause. "You're speaking now." He chuckled. "I guess I just never thought I'd see you rise this fast. Neither did I. But here I was." That weekend, I stood on the rooftop of the new space Julian's team had secured for me, a restored brownstone overlooking the city skyline. It wasn't just an office. It was a sanctuary. And soon, it would open its doors to young artists, dreamers, and those like me who were told they'd never amount to anything. And as I stared at the sun setting over the city, I whispered quietly to myself, "I don't need your legacy anymore. I'm building my own." My mother's voice cracked through the speakerphone like glass hitting tile. "She's what?" The estate lawyer repeated himself calmly. "Lena Moore has officially registered the Painted Haven Foundation under her name, with full funding and nonprofit status. It's backed by Hayes International. Your family trust has no stake or legal authority over it." There was a pause. Not even breathing. Then, "You must be mistaken," she snapped. "She's a painter. A dreamer. She doesn't have what it takes to." "She does now," the lawyer said, and hung up. Back in the city, I was sitting in our brand new community room. Soft lights above. Dozens of blank canvases stacked along the walls. I watched a quiet boy with tear-filled eyes paint a blue swirl over a canvas, his expression focused, his hand trembling with purpose. He hadn't spoken since arriving, but he painted.
And that was enough for now.
Every part of me felt full. Not because I had money, but because I had meaning. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to earn anyone's approval. I was just doing what I was born to do. That night, Carter brought in the media liaison. Julian's condition had been clear, no personal spotlight. He didn't want his name paraded. He wanted impact, not praise. "We'll keep your story at the center," the liaison told me. "You're the heart of this." I hesitated. "If the story leaks, my parents will see everything." Carter met my eyes. "Maybe it's time they see the real you." 3 days later, a news segment aired. Not flashy. Just a heartfelt feature on a young woman who built something from scratch, backed by one of the city's most private philanthropists. The anchor smiled as footage rolled of me painting with kids, walking through the new shelter space, holding hands with a young girl who reminded me so much of myself. My phone buzzed nonstop. Text messages, emails, missed calls. But one message stood out.
Dad,
We saw the news.
come home.
Let's talk.
I stared at it for a long time. I didn't reply.
The next morning, I walked into the cafe I used to work at during college. Same chip tables. Same smell of roasted beans and vanilla syrup. The owner, Mrs. Helen, looked up and gasped. Lena Moore? On my floor again. I laughed and hugged her. I had to come back. This place raised me. You look different, she said, eyes scanning me with warmth. Like a woman who finally knows what she's worth. I looked around. Would you ever consider letting us host a student gallery night here? Just once a month. She beamed. I'll clear the walls. That night, Julian called me directly. It was rare for him to reach out himself. You handled the coverage with grace, he said. I was terrified. Good, he said with a soft laugh. That means you cared. He paused, then added, You've come far, Lena. But I hope you know this isn't the end. I know, I whispered. It's just the beginning. Across town, my parents sat in their cold, spotless kitchen. My father clenched the edge of the marble island. She's doing this without us? She made us look like fools, my mother hissed. No, he said, staring at his phone screen again, watching my interview on loop. She made herself look strong. I stood outside the house I once called home. Same iron gate. Same ivy crawling up the front walls. But it didn't feel like my home anymore. It felt like a past version of myself was buried inside it, quiet, timid, constantly seeking validation. Now, I was just here to reclaim my peace. The door opened before I knocked. My mother appeared first, visibly startled, as if she didn't expect I'd actually show up. Behind her, my father stood straighter than usual, but the lines on his face had deepened.
His voice faltered. Lena.
You look different. I offered, calm. He nodded slowly. Stronger. I am. They led me into the sitting room, the one we never used except to impress guests. Now, it was full of unease. I sat, legs crossed, arms resting on the couch, not rigid, not defensive. I got a message, I said plainly. So, what is it you want to talk about? My father opened his mouth, then closed it again. Finally, he exhaled and said, I think we were wrong. My mother looked down, avoiding my gaze.
About what?
I asked, voice gentle but firm. About how he treated you. About removing you from the trust. We thought you'd fail without us. But instead, you've become someone people admire. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I just listened. He added, Your foundation, what you're doing for those kids, those families, it's something even we haven't accomplished. My mother's voice was quieter. I suppose we judged too fast. I tilted my head. You didn't just judge. You cut me out. There was a silence, so thick it hung in the air like fog. But I'm not angry anymore, I continued. I learned something. You can grow more from rejection than you ever can from praise. Because when someone slams a door on you, you stop knocking and start building your own. My mother teared up, her hand clutching her necklace. You came to say that? She asked. No, I said, standing. I came because you asked me to. I'm here out of respect, not revenge. I wanted to hear what you had to say, and now I have. My father stood, almost uncertain. Is there anything we can do? Yes, I said, looking at them both. You can support the kids I'm trying to help. Not for me, but for them. Then I offered something I never thought I'd offer again. Come visit the center.
See it for yourselves.
Not as donors.
Just as people.
That Sunday, they did. They walked through the doors of the painted haven, greeted not by staff in suits, but by children with paint-splattered hands and shy smiles. My father watched a boy craft a sculpture from broken wood. My mother knelt next to a young girl who proudly showed off a painting of a house, her dream house. No one cared about last names or legacies in that space. Only kindness. Only healing. Only future. Later, as I stood by the window in my office upstairs, Julian appeared beside me. His voice, as calm as always. They came? I nodded. They saw something real. For the first time. He studied my expression. You okay? I smiled.
Yeah.
Because this time, I'm walking in for me. Not to prove anything. Just to be who I am. Julian nodded. That's how you know you've won. The day the Painted Haven officially opened its doors to the public, the sun came up brighter than usual, or maybe I just noticed it more. I stood near the entrance, watching the crowd slowly form. Journalists, local families, students, donors, volunteers, even artists from neighboring cities had come to witness the beginning of something different. There was no red carpet, no big banners, just walls covered in artwork by kids who used to believe they had nothing to say. Now, their voices were painted in every brushstroke. I wore simple clothes. No designer brands. Just me, Lena Moore, the girl they once said wouldn't make it. The woman who chose her own way instead of the one mapped out for her. And as I stood there, a young girl tugged at my sleeve. Her eyes wide. Her voice barely above a whisper. Miss Lena, are you really the owner? I knelt to meet her gaze. I'm not the owner, I said with a warm smile. We all are. This place belongs to every voice that was ever told it didn't matter. She nodded, then hugged me. Across the street, leaning against a sleek black car, my father watched quietly. He didn't try to come inside. But he didn't leave either. My brother Ethan stood beside him, arms crossed, looking oddly proud. She's different, Dad finally murmured. Ethan chuckled.
No, Dad.
She's always been like this. You just didn't see it. My father stared a little longer, then said softly, she didn't need the trust fund. Ethan turned to him. She became one. A few weeks later, a letter arrived at the foundation. No sender name on the envelope, just clean handwriting that I instantly recognized, my mother's. Inside, one line. We may have taken your name off the papers, but you wrote it back into something no document could ever hold. Attached was a personal check, not to me, but to the Painted Haven with a note. No conditions. No ownership. Just support. Over the months that followed, the center grew. New rooms opened. A second location was scouted. Volunteers came in droves. We partnered with local schools, started scholarships, brought in trauma counselors, and held monthly exhibits. But the real success? A girl named May, who had been sleeping in her car, painted a piece that now hangs in a downtown gallery. A boy named Caleb, who hadn't spoken in months, started hosting art workshops for younger kids. And me? I finally stopped looking over my shoulder for approval. Because I wasn't that quiet, invisible daughter anymore. I was Lena Moore, founder, advocate, artist, leader. And the girl they once tried to erase became the signature everyone now looked up to.